First thing is I saw a period in the market where people may not have the money to dollar cost average, and people definitely are not traders. I mean, I even put it first line in the book: you are not a trader. You suck. Just admit it. And that's it's not anything to be embarrassed about. 98% of people lose money trading over a 10-year period.
Yeah.
So most people, to accumulate Bitcoin, the best way to do it I've seen is to do things you're already doing. And like we always say, meet people where they are. And I put out 10 ways that you can earn Bitcoin for doing things you already do, for shopping, for playing chess, for walking, browsing the internet, just everyday things, learning, reading, everything you do anyway, you do it and just earn money while you do it. So I wanted to give that as a way for people who may not have a lot of money and who aren't traders.
Yep.
You need to be trying to earn sats as much as possible because if you don't know, 92% of the supply is already mined, and we're about a year away from the halvening of 2024, which I think is a huge implication as far as supply and price and all of those factors. So that's why I definitely want to put out that book.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We are here today with Yzer Jackson, who is one of the first people I followed when I went and fell down the Bitcoin Twitter, crypto Twitter rabbit hole, hellscape, whatever. So I've been following him since 2018. It's great to have him here to speak with him about Bitcoin, crypto, etc. today. Constantly busy, this guy, constantly doing new stuff. Recently put out a new ebook, which we'll touch on. But before I get into what he's done, please, Yzer, please introduce yourself to the audience, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me, Frank. My name is Yzer Jackson. I've been a Bitcoin educator for 10 years now in October, and it's been a wild ride. I've been able to put out now 4 ebooks, 2 published books, and do a lot of work in the education space with, podcasts, the book tour, interviews, everything possible to get the word out there about Bitcoin. So just glad to be a part of this community and able to talk with guys like you. Definitely.
Much appreciated. Thank you. I actually want to zoom all the way back right away, if you don't mind. So today in 2023, it's almost kind of cool to be associated with Bitcoin, whereas I'm assuming in 2013, you were really an outcast if you were into this space. So could you juxtapose kind of what it's like being into it now versus what it was like being into it then?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, back then it was so scary. Like the times of Bitcoin back then was the Mount Gox Silk Road. It's for shadowy coders. It's for criminals. It's a Ponzi scheme. I mean, I've heard literally everything. I've been called everything but a child of God, basically, when it comes to the Bitcoin space. And it was crazy because I'm originally in computer science and I worked in the tech field. And it's open source code. That's the thing about Bitcoin is it's been viewed by myself as well as others who are smarter than me. And if there was any flaws or anything that would, any backdoors, we would have caught it a long time ago. Bitcoin would have been an experiment that was done years ago. But the fact that it's still here, those times back then versus now it's sort of cool. Like, you're starting to see, especially when I teach kids, if they know about Bitcoin, they're the coolest person in their group. They're like, oh yeah, I know about this stuff. So the next generation, which is what I'm starting to focus on, is definitely looking at Bitcoin as cool money, the money that's outside of the state. Whereas, before it was sort of, the outcast, sort of like the old cypherpunks in the 80s and 90s, same thing. It was like, who are these guys who want privacy on the internet? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. So,
Yeah.
just glad to be here 10 years later and be able to keep educating.
That's legit. Yeah. And to quickly just to take a quick educational moment here, I was just describing what the cypherpunks were to someone else. A friend of mine is a teacher in Japan, and she contacted me and was like, oh, I'm going to teach this lesson on Bitcoin. And she sent me the textbook she's going to use to teach it. And it says, Bitcoin was created in 2009. And it makes it seem like it's something someone whipped up in their kitchen, in 2 months. The cypherpunks were people who had been working on different elements of what comprised Bitcoin eventually for, some say, even like almost 40 years before Bitcoin existed. I mean, 30, 40
Right.
years before it, especially in the 80s and 90s, though. So Bitcoin wasn't like an overnight sort of flash,
Mhm.
not some genius thing that someone thought of overnight. There was a lot of different pieces to it that came together over a long, long period of time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
sorry.
Sort of like the internet. Tim Berners-Lee didn't make the internet, in a couple months. It's years of progress getting to that point. So
Yeah,
yeah, just like that, everybody that's contributed have all essentially made Bitcoin. We're all Satoshi.
love it. So you seem quite comfortable as an educator. You're a funny guy. You bring a lot of levity to your style of, educating people about Bitcoin. But I heard on your show once, a gentleman of crypto, that you were a bit nervous to start talking about it at first. And I'm curious as to what made you sort of come out of your shell and start talking about it. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, so I did stand up comedy in college for like 4 or 5 years. So speaking in front of people wasn't the issue. Like public speaking isn't that hard for me. And I know it's kind of weird because I think public speaking is ranked number one of things people are fearful of, even more than death. But I've always been pretty comfortable. I've been teaching basically since I was 14 in summer camps and my mom's summer camps and after school. So I was pretty, confident there. The problem was Bitcoin as a subject. As you know, once you get into Bitcoin, it's so much of a subject. Bitcoin really is a college course within itself. I mean, when you start talking about the history of money and cryptography and software, and I mean, you just go down economics, finance. You have so many different areas to learn before I felt comfortable teaching people about Bitcoin. So, as I always say, I started in 2013. I didn't even post about Bitcoin until 2015, and I didn't do any podcasts or anything until 2017. So for most people who they learn it and then 2 months later they got a course out, calm down, my man. You need to you need to see a couple cycles. You need to see the bad media attention, the good media attention. You need to have family members calling you scared at 2 a.m. Hey, I saw the price. You need all of that to encompass, basically what it takes to educate in the Bitcoin space. So I was a bit scared at first. Shout out to my business partner, King Bless, my co-host on the Gentleman of Crypto. He was more comfortable as far as just speaking in general. He's a Hollywood guy, and he basically forced me into it. He was like, "There's nobody." He's like, "I'm literally talking to dozens of people. Nobody understands Bitcoin the way you do." As soon as I bring it up, this is 2016 when he's saying this. He's like, "I bring it up, and the first thing people say is, oh yeah, it said like internet money for illegal stuff.' That's all people were telling him." He's like, "And I talked to you for 3 hours, and you're breaking down, the hierarchical deterministic wallets, and you're telling me about Xpubs." And he was like, "Nobody knows it like you, so why would you not do a podcast or something?" And it turned into, as of now, the second longest running daily podcast in Bitcoin history, over 1,100 episodes. 6 years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you actually call it intentionally the gentleman of crypto. And I heard you say something, or I read something you wrote on Twitter once. Now
Mm-hmm.
you only invest in Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
but you call it the gentleman of crypto. I assume it's to kind of meet people where they're at. You called it playing 4D chess. Could you describe that a little bit? What's that sort of strategy about?
Oh yeah. So we didn't have a name for like the first 10 shows. We were looking at possible names, and we were trying to decide whether we were going to focus on crypto or Bitcoin. And one thing we thought about was, most people when they talk about Bitcoin, they put it all in the same pot. And also, to be honest, crypto news is much more hilarious, much more entertaining. I mean, we're seeing DeFi hacks from people sending it to some guy, send me one ETH, I'll send you back two. You're looking at different exchanges going down, the goofiness of some of the NFT guys and some of the ICO. The ICO thing was what was big when we started. So I was like, let's do crypto simply because it's more, more of a industry that's spread out. But we'll pull those crypto people into Bitcoin. Like basically, like you said, 4D chess. People show up to talk about cryptos, and then they basically are converted into Bitcoiners, which we've done a lot of over the years. And the gentleman of crypto actually came from me and my co-host. I was at his house. We were watching Narcos, and they were talking about the gentleman of Cali. Most people don't know that, but we were watching, and they said the gentleman of Cali. I just was like, "What if we were the gentleman of crypto?" He was like, "I like that one," and we just went with it, and it went from there. And like I said, I find it easier as a Bitcoin educator to meet people at the crypto stage
Yeah.
than the forget all that, only focus on Bitcoin, because I understand human psychology. As soon as you tell them not to do it, that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to get curious. They're going to look. So why not teach them exactly what it is? I don't teach people what to think. I teach them how to think, so they can think critically about it and say, hey, okay, I understand this is not something that is considered money, but if I want to go into, the casino and win some money and have fun doing it, that's what crypto essentially is for most people. Just exploring new technology, trying to win some money and get rich quick. But I don't have any problems with it. I'm a freedom maximalist. I just think Bitcoin is the best tool.
That's fair. That's
Mhm.
fair. And you came out, your book, Bitcoin in Black America, came out, I think it was towards the peak of the 2017 cycle. If
It
I'm,
was actually 2019.
oh, I apologize. I thought it came out
Hmm.
earlier. My mistake. So your book came out in 2019. It's a powerful name for a book, obviously, and now you sort of become the representative of Bitcoin in Black America. That has to I want to say the first thing that comes to mind is that has to sort of take a toll on you because now everyone's going to be looking to you for when the price is up or down or what's this and what's that. And you have to sort of be the person that's sort of, you're not only demystifying it, but, dispelling a lot of the nonsense that goes on, the rhetoric that goes on around it in the mainstream media. What was that process? What was that process like emotionally?
Oh yeah. So the process for the book itself was to just get a message out to the Black community so we wouldn't be last again. I just remember being mad at my parents. Not I used to look at them and be like, "How did you all not know the internet was going to be a big thing? How did you all not prepare? You didn't buy any domains. You didn't learn about software. You didn't know anything about anything. Oh my goodness!" So this seemed like my chance to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Okay.
And I think the media did a great job of marketing Bitcoin as like white frat crypto bros who only want Lambos and yachts, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, not just the Black community, but every community can use Bitcoin, and it was different countries and different places, and I just wanted to make sure to get that message out. And I thought it would just be sort of a niche book, and people would sort of maybe know it, and sort of like I always wanted to make like a cult classic where like the people who know, but it wouldn't get out. And then, Jack Dorsey retweeted the book, and it was, it was pretty much over from there. When the creator of Twitter, puts out your book, like you said, that sort of had an emotional toll. Like for 2 days, I just kind of sat in the dark and was like, am I ready for this? Do I
Mm,
understand the implications? I had to turn my phone off because it was getting hot from all the notifications.
wow.
um, I tell the story sometimes how when he put the tweet out, I was on the plane and I had like 12% left, and when the plane landed, I took it off airplane mode. From that 12%, it died before we even left the airplane because there's so many notifications back to back to back. So that's
Wow.
that's how I basically was like, all right, let me take a deep breath, take a step back, because he just basically made me the face of Black America as far as with Bitcoin. And after that, a lot of other things happened and being featured. But emotionally, I'm one of those people where it takes a lot to get to me. So I'm taking it in stride. This is a fun ride, and it's like this is what I wanted. It just came a lot faster than I thought, and overall, I don't feel really any pressure because I'm giving good information. If I was scamming or if I was trying to sell people on some random projects, I may feel bad. But I wake up every morning fine because I'm like, I'm giving you the best information
Wow.
possible,
Okay.
and anybody that uses it, hey, they've all been winners with me.
Okay. That's fair. That's a
Hmm.
good approach.
Yeah.
You recently put out a new ebook, which is it's a bit shorter, more of like a guide to how to stack sats. And my mom
Hmm.
listens to this, so I don't know if I could say the title, just, but whatever. But stack sats, mother effer. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about it. Why is it important? I've checked it out. I'll offer my opinion afterwards, but what made you put out something like this, a sort of guide for stacking sats without actually taking your
Hmm.
hard-earned dollars and buying sats with them?
Oh yeah. So two things. First thing is I saw a period in the market where people may not have the money to dollar cost average, and people definitely are not traders. I mean, I even put it first line in the book: "You are not a trader. You suck. Just admit it." And that's it's not anything to be embarrassed about. 98% of people lose money trading over a 10-year period.
Yep.
So most people, to accumulate Bitcoin, the best way to do it I've seen is to do things you're already doing. And like we always say, meet people where they are.
Yep.
And I put out 10 ways that you can earn Bitcoin for doing things you already do, for shopping, for playing chess, for walking, browsing the internet, just everyday things, learning, reading, everything you do anyway, you do it and just earn money while you do it. So I wanted to give that as a way for people who may not have a lot of money and who aren't traders.
Yep.
You need to be trying to earn sats as much as possible, because if you don't know, 92% of the supply is already mined, and we're about a year away from the halvening of 2024, which I think is a huge implication as far as supply and price and all of those factors. So that's why I definitely want to put out that book. The second reason is it's a lead up to the second edition of Bitcoin in Black America. So this ebook came out in August. Next month, I have another ebook coming out. I'll give you all early preview. It's called Generational Bitcoin,
Okay.
a parent's guide to teaching their kids about Bitcoin, because
Mm.
that's another hole that I'm seeing. I'm seeing some, kids content and games and things, like, different card games and toys and books, but parents are concerned that their kids are learning about it and they're not learning the right things. They're just sort of learning like, oh yeah, I want to gamble with it or trade or try this whatever cryptocurrency. So I decided to come up with a guide. This one is a bit longer. It's about 2 or 3 times as long as this first one, but
Cool.
yeah. So I'm just putting out these ebooks in preparation for October. My 10th anniversary is when I'll drop Bitcoin in Black America second edition. So it's all just lead up to that.
Ah, that's amazing. That's really cool.
Hmm.
Oh, thank you for sharing.
Yep. Mhm.
And you also you recently started working with the Yzer app, spelled Yzer. I actually found this app a little bit before I found out you were involved with it and was using it. And now I have a background in I did part of my MBA, so I have some traditional training in finance and stuff like that. And I have to say that using this app, the way that the knowledge was distilled, because it goes into Bitcoin, everything from the
Mhm.
mechanics of it to the Austrian economic underpinnings, philosophical stuff, practical stuff about using wallets, everything. It's distilled, and I use that word versus sort of watered down because it really is like it's very potent, all of the information on the app.
Right.
And you get to earn sats while you use it. So I was hoping you could sort of share what your involvement with the app is and how they're coming up with the content for the app. I'm curious.
Hmm. Yes. So let me just make sure everybody knows it's called Yzer. I've had people they're like Yzer, YZ is it? Was it? They don't know, but it's YZER Yzer, because we all want to get wiser in this space. But yes, so working with the team, the co-founders Hirsch and Sanja, great people and great hardworking team. Very small team right now, but the content comes from Bitcoiners who have been in the space for years. Big is basically teaching Bitcoiners from Bitcoiners.
Okay.
And like you said, the information it spreads in different areas. And this was a goal of mine was to either build an app or invest in an app where education was done in micro classes or schools or lessons, because what I've seen is, and you may know this too, Frank. Somebody asks you, "All right, what do I need to know to learn about Bitcoin?" And you send 20
Yeah,
links.
yeah,
It's books, it's podcasts, and then people just look at it like, "All right, man, where is one place I can go
yeah,
and get all this information?"
yeah,
And not only can they get all the information on the Wiser app, because it is a gamified experience, sort of like the Duolingo of Bitcoin.
yeah,
You also get paid for it.
yeah,
That's a thing, a next step in education overall that I've started to see is that when I was younger, I got $5 for A's, $4 for B's, and nothing for C's, D's, and F's. My mom was like,
mm,
"There are no C's. You don't get anything for that." So, but as a kid, it was great to know that there was some sort of reward for that, and a reward for learning that's instant, that you can actually withdraw via Lightning,
yeah,
is amazing. That's an amazing innovation in the education space. And not just for Bitcoin, but I think most education will end up being like this: bite-sized classes, real quick, to the point, 5 minutes, 10 minutes every day, learning a subject. And if you do it consistently, the constraints of the education system are gone. I mean, we saw that COVID basically exposed it. It said, hey, we've been doing school for a year online.
yep,
Why do we need to all show up at this place and go to classes for a set hour and a half? And it basically just exploded that whole model.
yep,
And I think that this is just a testament to that. And we're doing it in Bitcoin early. So shout out to the Wiser team.
yep.
And, like you said, everybody who joins, 50 sats right off the bat, and you earn sats just for learning. You learn more about it, get paid to learn.
Yeah, I've shared it with some people, and they haven't sort of like gotten around to it yet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. I'm just kind of like, what else do you need? You're asking questions about the stuff, plus you can earn some of it while you're doing it. But yeah, it's a pretty amazing. It's the best app I've used for Bitcoin education. Not that I've used a ton, but it's
Mm-hmm.
hands down. There's a few that I've used, and this is definitely the best one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm super happy that you're involved with it. In terms of education, so I actually recently learned on Twitter that your mother was a teacher, right? Is that
Mm-hmm. And grandmother.
and
Yeah.
grandmother? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm a former teacher, 12 years, college lecturer, and taught in public schools for a while as well, K through 12. Um, and one of the things I'm constantly at least taking mental notes on is sort of the impediments to Bitcoin education, whether they're practical, whether they're philosophical. So you've been doing this far longer than I have. I've only been writing about it for about 2 or 3 years. What do you see as the biggest impediments right now? And what do you see as sort of the remedies for those impediments?
Mhm. So I think one problem with Bitcoin education, for one, when we talk about the school system, they are just now getting around to personal finance
Mm.
classes. I know in Florida they just put personal finance as a credit in 2021.
Yeah.
So we're talking about just now getting to a point, because I didn't learn about personal finance in high school. I don't know if you did, Frank,
Nope.
but that was not a subject in high school. It was just something. Oh, that's what parents do. They pay bills, and
Yep.
that was it. So that's the first step. Is, in schools they're starting to realize personal finance is important,
Yep.
and now we can piggyback off of that and sort of put Bitcoin into the personal finance curriculums at high schools, which is what I would prefer, high schools and colleges, because there is no reason why they shouldn't be learning about the most innovative subject since the internet. I mean, this has huge implications, not just on a community scale, but on a national scale. I mean, we can't have a bunch of, dumb Americans basically walking around that don't know about the next financial system. We already don't know about the first one. It
Yep.
took years for books to come out and people to realize what's going on. I have friends that I've never heard them say the word inflation until until 3 years ago.
Wow.
Never heard them say the word. Never even heard them care about an economy. But I think Bitcoin does that to you inherently. So I think that is something that's needed in education. And some of the drawbacks, or roadblocks, I would say, one is funding. Education is notoriously bad at being funded because the return on investment doesn't come for years, and a lot of times you may not get a return on investment. However, I do see that because Bitcoin, one of the things we learned is delayed gratification. I'm looking at this for the rest of my life.
Yep.
So doing something now that may not pay me back for 10 years is fine with me. That's essentially what Bitcoin is. So the second thing is, outside of funding, the second thing is the media propaganda against Bitcoin. Because one thing that that they've done a great job of is they discourage people from even wanting to learn,
Yep.
which is crazy. People are like, I don't even want to touch it. I don't want to look at it.
Yep.
I got you got to at least want to learn for me to teach you. If you don't want to learn, I'm done arguing. My debate days are over with with people as far as trying to convince you to be into Bitcoin. I know I can't save everybody, but they're killing people's want to learn about Bitcoin.
Yep.
Those are probably the two biggest ones, and then I would say the last but not least would be the amount of tools available for businesses. Because even though we can teach college, teach high school, we can teach individuals, businesses, small businesses, I would say they should actually have lectures, and I've done some for some of them, medium and large size, like Fidelity, Cash App, Coinbase, but I started out with small businesses, and they would always say, well, why would I need it? Most people aren't going to pay with Bitcoin. And then, boom, 5 years later, all of a sudden, it got Bitcoin ATM in the store. We accept Bitcoin now. And they're like, thank you for telling us, because as a small business, you need all the advantages you can get.
Yep.
And that's what we're trying to focus on, is the little guy who's trying to start a business from scratch. What advantages can you have except in Bitcoin? So all of those things, I think, are sort of impediments, but we're getting through it. That's why we're all here. That's why we're working hard as we can, trying to get the message as clear as possible.
Yeah, I've been speaking with a lot of people from circular economies abroad, in Namibia, in
Mhm.
Ghana, in Venezuela, and in different places um, outside of the United States. And I think one of the impediments here is that because it's taxed, so these small businesses are going to have to market to market. No, they're going to have to mark their income to market
Yep.
if everything's being reported properly. Now, I worked at a restaurant for years, and I know that cash gets exchanged between people, and not everything gets
Yeah.
totally reported. But I would imagine, and what I'm noticing, I spoke with someone in Namibia and someone in Ghana, and both of those people have spoke with members of the government and the central banks there, and they're like, look. This is essentially just barter. If you guys want to use this between each other, that's great. But it's
Right.
not the same thing here in the United States. So, have you seen amongst the small businesses you've spoken with, has that been one of the concerns, or not necessarily?
Yeah, it's been one of the concerns, absolutely. But one of the things that I always talk about is your corporate treasury. That's one way to start right off the bat, where I have basically put out there. I believe in the next decade, your worth as a public business, it won't necessarily be how much dollars are you worth.
Yep.
They're going to also take a hard look at how much Bitcoin do you have,
Yep.
because that actually gives the safety net necessary for me to invest in a small business. If I'm looking at a small business that's worth, let's say, $1 million, and then a small business that has $1 million worth of Bitcoin, the one with $1 million worth of Bitcoin is probably more safe.
Yep.
I'm sure most people may look at it like, hey, the dollar is dominant. Yeah, but when you look at these corporate treasuries, a lot of times that backup is what could ultimately save your entire business. So if businesses start now, small amounts into your corporate treasury. And again, like you said, this is in America. In other countries, they should be going diving head first when they say barter, and they're not talking about taxing each individual transaction. Then you should be diving head first. But in America, start with corporate treasuries, accept Bitcoin if you can via Lightning, and just to test it out. You won't get a lot of people at first, but you will get a good marketing. If you say you accept Bitcoin, people like myself will come just for that.
That's right. Yeah.
Just to see if it works, and you'll have people that show up to see if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
All of that is good for your business. So that's why, and even having the knowledge to build the infrastructure of Bitcoin business is great for you as well. So it's really all upside.
Okay. So talking about having corporations, small businesses put it on their balance sheet in terms of their treasury, in terms of allocation for retail investors, when people come to you and say like, look, how much of my cash should I invest in this thing? What do you often say to them? I mean, I know that you're not a financial advisor. Nothing on this podcast is financial advice, but if you do have to sort of, I don't know, sort of give them some information, what do you think is sort of the best way for retail investors to approach this if they're just starting to get exposure to it?
Oh yeah.
Now.
So if you're just getting exposed to it, again, the reason I wrote the Stack Sats ebook is so that you can start off with exposure that's very, very low risk, meaning you can earn sats for free. You don't even have to buy them at first. Just see how they work. Send yourself a few transactions to a Lightning wallet or to another custodial wallet just to see how it works. Because again, I should say you always got to have skin in the game. And your allocation as an individual, not financial advice, should be whatever you are willing to lose. That's the old way of saying it. Whatever you're willing to lose, you should put to the Bitcoin market. And I tend to think of it as the reverse. Whatever you're willing to lose, keep in cash. Because that is definitely a melting ice cube. And we know with inflation, you're losing money every single day. At this point, with the inflation rate where it is, I believe somebody said you're losing about 1% of your wealth every 30 days. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, somebody fact check me, but I saw a guy speaking about it on a podcast, and I was like, if that is ridiculous. If you lose 1% of your wealth every 30 days, you're looking at inflation taking away your purchasing power at a rate we've never seen before. So however much you're willing to lose, keep it in cash. Anything else you should be storing in Bitcoin, only in cold storage, because as I always say, no keys, no cheese. If you don't own your private keys, you do not own Bitcoin. So make sure you do that. And that's usually what I say for people allocation wise. And if they ask me how much have I done, for anybody that knows, 95% of my savings are in Bitcoin. So I'm not just talking. It's been that way since 2013. So the value received from my savings being in Bitcoin over the last 10 years, what took me 10 years would take most people their entire life. So it just saved me a lot of time on top of that. So whatever your allocation is, that's what you should be thinking. Freedom, baby. That's what you're looking for.
Speaking of that, I was actually the next question I wanted to ask. So one of the things that I try to focus on with this podcast is I noticed the changes. I was always sort of hustling. I was in social services, humanitarian work, all this sort of people to people sort of jobs that don't necessarily pay a ton of money before I got into Bitcoin. I used to be a teacher, and that's how I got to do some of my MBA for free, because I started studying money once I learned what cryptocurrency was. But what I've noticed is people who really get Bitcoin, it tends to catalyze a change in them. Plus, people who hold it for a long time, like you just said, get some sort of financial freedom. I'm curious as to how you feel like it's changed your life. I mean, outside of just having more money on a personal level, how has it changed your life? And for the other people that you've taught that you feel like have really sort of embraced it, gone along, understood the ups and downs, what it's catalyzed in their lives. You don't have to go too far into it, but I think just, it's something that I try to touch on with a lot of the guests here.
Oh yeah. So I would say one of the points that I made earlier, delayed gratification. That taught me a lot, because growing up around the people that I grew up around, especially a lot of times in Black culture, in order to be perceived as having money, you need to spend money, and you need to spend a lot of it and buy the best Jordans, the best clothes, the best jewelry, to make people believe that you have money. And when in reality, long term, a lot of that stuff doesn't matter. And delayed gratification is something I learned with Bitcoin, because honestly, a lot of the stuff you think you need, you really don't. And when you look at it from a Bitcoin standpoint, you look at it like, well, let me first start. And from a traditional standpoint, money not spent today is worth less tomorrow. That's why you want to spend it. With Bitcoin, money spent today is money worth more tomorrow. So you actually are encouraged to save it, unless you have a very, very bad inflated currency. Ours is relatively stable, so for us, the best solution is to save it. And I always talk about the $3,000 burrito. I got a burrito from a food truck. A good friend Justin, he was working on, and I believe it was $15, $16 for the whole order, which is about $3,000 today.
Yep.
And looking at that, telling that story, I instantly was thinking to myself, was like, how many things did I buy back in the day that I really had no use for, didn't care. I have clothes and shoes and just a bunch of stuff that I don't wear today. Why? But I have it, and it just taught me. It really changed me a lot when thinking about material possessions. For example, 80% of my wardrobe is Bitcoin t-shirts, and they were all given to me. Like I don't really have
Nice.
that much of a wardrobe anymore. I've sold a bunch of clothes. I've sold a bunch of stuff I don't need. It just really takes away, the material mindset of I need this, I need this. No, you don't. You really don't need it. And if you can remember 10 years ago, then you can plan for 10 years from now.
Yep.
And that's what I always say is I can remember 10 years ago exactly what I was doing, how I was spending money, how my thought process was, and how it's changed. So now I can, 10 years from now I can plan. Don't need to buy that. I'll buy some more sats.
Yep.
Don't need to buy that. Buy some more sats. It's that simple. And it's just a change in mindset. Also, too, the way Bitcoin changes you, it changes the way that you think about war and how we've been in perpetual wars my entire life, but also before, because when you start to break down what keeps the fiat system running, people are like, well, it's backed by nothing. Technically, it is. The military shows up. It's backed by somebody. So, and Bitcoin is ultimate truth. So when you have a currency where it's constantly increasing in value over time simply because of the scarcity and the use case, you start to realize, well, I don't have to worry about taking other people's resources because we have abundant resources with having Bitcoin. And we don't have to steal from other countries to keep the pipeline going, of things we need, because everything on this earth is abundant. I don't care what anybody says. We have plenty of everything. The only people that make it scarce are people who control the supply. And because Bitcoin is provably scarce, we now have that opportunity. So it's definitely changed my mindset on war. Like people say, Bitcoin, not bombs. Stop supporting these people who literally are taking your money and they're just going to war, and it's ridiculous. So it's changed my mindset on those two things.
Yeah, that's the second. Yeah, and I think just out of curiosity, when you're talking about Justin Redrick, who wrote "From Bars to Bitcoin," the guy you mentioned,
Bars of Bitcoin,
super nice guy. I interviewed him about a year ago. Super nice guy, and talk about like catalyzing change in someone's life. Really amazing story.
Oh yeah.
When it comes to that, I think you saw on Nostr, I listened to a little talk that Gladstein gave last night.
Right.
For those who don't know, he's I think the chief strategy officer of the Human Rights Foundation. And I asked him a question sort of about how institutions that have a lot of this power that you just talked about, some of the war machines, some of the institutions that actually benefit from disaster and poverty in the world, the IMF, the World Bank, institutions that are permanently loaning countries money, indebting them further, they're not going to let that power go easily or tomorrow. So what sort of time frame do you look at for, like, I know this is sort of a subjective way to put it, for real sort of macro change to occur as a result of Bitcoin existing?
So I've put it at 7 years, because 2030 is supposedly the time where we have Agenda 21, where we have supposedly the sustainability agreement where, you own nothing and you'll be happy.
Right.
That's sort of the time period I'm on in my mind, is you got 7 years to get your stuff together, because I think Bitcoin is a grassroots movement. It will have to be grassroots and grown organically. However, nothing helps people realize how much they need Bitcoin more than tragedy, unfortunately. And that's just with everything in real life. You don't realize what you need until something happens. And I think we're going to go through one of the worst recessions of all time. I just think, well, we're already in it. Technically speaking, the definition of a recession is subsequent quarters of negative GDP growth. Right. We already done that. So we're in a recession, people. But I think once it gets really worse, where people can't access bank accounts, or there's different security holds on how much money you can spend and send, it's already happening. Once people really realize that, I think that's the wake up call they need to realize, all right, I need to get on a Bitcoin standard, because this other way is not going to work. So that's what I would say is the changing of the guard, so to say, will come from the people, because you have to remember, politicians, They only do what people want.
Yeah.
That's why they flip flop all the time. Once the people change, then all of a sudden they
Yep.
change. And I've seen this in my lifetime. I've been able to see it. Never thought I would, but I've seen people literally say the exact opposite of something they said 20 years ago because public sentiment has
Yep.
changed. And I think that's what's going to happen with Bitcoin is public sentiment is going to be, we're starting to see it with presidents already, with Robert Kennedy Jr. and with other presidents mentioning it. They're starting to realize I can't get elected unless I have some sort of Bitcoin strategy,
Yeah.
because then globally we're out the picture because every other country is going for it. So that's the game theory, and that's sort of what they'll pick up on. So I think organically people will adopt it. The problem is this is the only movement where when people adopt it, they'll actually front run the financial institutions and they won't have anything to do about it because it's a scarce supply. Some people are scared of, BlackRock and these other institutions. They'll introduce the ETF and they'll control the price. The problem is the reason they can control that price is because there's an infinite amount of gold and silver and commodities. You don't know what the supply is. They find new gold almost every week.
Yeah.
We know Bitcoin is scarcity. So if we're looking at exchanges and there's only 21 million, but there's 200 million Bitcoin on exchanges, there's going to be some audits that come real quick. Hey, what is this paper Bitcoin? What is this real? So they can't really manipulate the price, but so much. They can only do year to year maybe, but they can't do it over a long span.
Yep.
Once that's realized and people, grassroots wise have basically made up in their mind they're going to use Bitcoin, it's only a matter of time.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for that day. And I think 7 years is a good area, 7, 8 years.
It's a little bit quicker than I expected, but I hear all that for sure. And what you were referencing there was like with a lot of people are comparing a spot Bitcoin ETF to a gold ETF, which I think only came to market in like 2006 or 7 or something like that.
Yeah.
Gold is also a lot harder to audit than Bitcoin because Bitcoin
Right.
is just an open ledger. You can audit it, whereas gold, you don't know necessarily where it's stored and what's a paper claim to gold versus the actual gold.
Absolutely.
We don't need to jump down that rabbit hole though, but yeah, it's a very good point. Speaking of price in the shorter term, I think I saw on Twitter a few days ago, you mentioned something like, all right, guys, we don't need to, be gambling on these shit coins because Bitcoin's going to about 250 in this next cycle. Why that target? I mean, I'm not sure if that's like your official target, but why 250? Why round about that target?
Oh yeah. So most of the analysis I've seen has been somewhere between 180 and 300.
Okay.
250 seems just based on some of the charts I've looked at, technical analysis. Even though I don't like to get into price too much, that's about the range.
Okay.
I think 250 is pretty fair based on the growth of other bull markets. And of course, historical data doesn't determine future results.
Yeah.
But if you needed a historical data point, the growth since every happening, we've seen a certain amount of growth in Bitcoin, and that growth will put us somewhere around 250, 260. Just using that model. Also, too, I actually am pretty bullish overall. I think we will get to $100 million Bitcoin in my lifetime. And the thing that's going to speed that up for most people, which I don't think they realize, is Bitcoin is going to be the preferred currency of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And the intersection of Bitcoin and AI is literally just starting. I think I've seen the first 2 articles in the last couple months, but I always say Bitcoin is for humans. But what happens when it's for robots?
Yep.
What happens when it's for AI? When they need to speak to another AI to process something or pay for it, and Bitcoin is the preferred one, and then you have all these AI machines constantly buying Bitcoin to constantly use it.
Yep.
That's what I'm talking about. Hyper Bitcoinization. People are like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, it happens faster than you think because AI, people think ChatGPT is like the first AI, and I'm like, no, the AI they've been discussing this for years, but you see how fast it took off once it started. Now, AI payments, I think that'll affect a lot of different factors. I think we got quadrillions and off the books liquidity that will want to game theory wise be in the Bitcoin. So that's the price I'm looking at long term. But in the short term, 250 is what I think we'll have because we're in the fight now. I think there will be some of the tail wagging the dog price action with big ETFs maybe coming and big players trying to enter in because they'll manipulate it to get in at a good price.
Yeah.
But once everybody's loaded up and it goes as far as it can, I think they're going to leave a lot of people behind after this next happening, 2024.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I'm not sure I said it, but 250,000 is what we were talking. Is the number when I said 250 is what I was referencing. I actually I looked at that and I sort of was like, all right, he's being a little ridiculous. And then I thought to myself, in the last cycle, we went from about 3,500 to about just under 70,000, which is about a 17 or 18x. From 29,000 or 28 where we are today to 250 is less than a 10x. So again, I'm not trying to get people pumped up or hopeful about what the price is going to be, but it wouldn't be illogical for Bitcoin to do that. And it's not that it stays at 250, maybe it comes back down to 150, 170, something like that. But this is what does happen around the halvening.
Oh yeah. Imagine us going sideways at 70K.
Yeah, right.
Going sideways at 80, and people are like, "Oh, it's a bear market," and you're just looking at it.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it is funny to think people are like, look at this thing and how it crashed. I mean, I got into this the end of the 2017 run. So I remember everything for 2018, 19, generally hovering between like 6,500 and 9,000. And I'm like, and so I look at it at 30,000, and I'm like, if this is the low, we're still talking about a 4x from where we were during the bear market. You just sort of have to stick around, and then I can already see it. I write a newsletter. I see the numbers dwindling. People are losing interest. And I just try to stress. I'm just like, honestly, like just skip lunch once a week or something and just put a little bit of that money into it. Like it's
exactly.
Yeah, I've been here before, and like it's it is what it is.
Yeah.
But
yeah, man. 10,000 used to be the dream.
Right.
I remember when I first like the old Bitcoin forums and Bitcoin talk forums. There were people who were like, "Man, if we ever hit 10,000, man, I'm retired. It's over." Like so. When people are talking about price today, I remember 10,000 being like the ultimate dream, and now people at 28,000 are like, "Oh, it's a bear market. It's going. It may go down another 50%." So what, man?
Right.
Like for me, it's basically like this is the dream from here on out. But for other people, they'll realize it the same way you did. I mean, people bought at 17, 18,000, and we're like, "Oh my god, I bought at the top," and I'm like, "There is no top to Bitcoin. You just got to stay long enough."
That's right. Yeah. And I think it was you that actually said you only buy the top once. You buy the top once, and then all the rest of the purchases, you sort of. You're not buying the top.
Just wait it out.
Yeah.
Just wait it out.
I want to jump back to something. You talked a little bit about politics and how politicians change. I won't get into exactly what you said, but you talked about not necessarily liking Obama when he got elected, and maybe still not liking him. And I don't know how to approach this. I'll just be honest, like as a white person asking a black person this, but I was working in inner city New York at that time, and I was actually living in Ghana for a little bit during his presidency. And obviously, there were a lot of people who were super proud to have him as president because he was black. So people who were also black. I was curious as to what your issue was with him, on realistically. And what if your thoughts have changed, if they didn't change?
Yeah. So one thing about politics, the reason why national politics, I'll say, I still think local and state are important to your everyday life. But national politics, one thing I've started to realize is a lot of these candidates are chosen, and the people that are behind them are the real bosses, and that presidents are just middle management.
Yep.
I figured that out pretty early on in life. I had an uncle that was, very in tune with that type of stuff. And when Obama first came around, I saw the hype amongst a lot of black people. It was like, man, we may finally have a black president. But just thinking critically, the first thing I was saying was like, he's not black. That's the first thing. His parents are from Kenya, and another one's from Kansas. His white mother is from Kansas. His African father he's African American, sure, but he's mixed. He's not. There's a difference. There's a unique experience of Black Americans versus African Americans. I mean, Elon Musk is African American, so that the skin color doesn't even matter. He's a mixed child. And at 19, I was saying this, and this is 2008. I'm just sitting there, I'm like, yeah, but he's mixed. Everybody kept saying black, and I was like, no, he's mixed. There's a distinction there. And most people were like, no, well, we're just going to accept him as black and whatever. And I just thought it kind of funny because I forget his name, Jeremiah, the pastor, Jeremiah Wright.
Okay.
When he was yelling and they were trying to put him in the media, as his pastor, and a lot of the stuff that went around his election, I don't know. I just found it fishy that this young senator came out of nowhere and is the president now. And I was like, all right. So I started looking up some of the people that were behind him, that were his supporters, and there were some of the same names that will pop up in Zabrig, the Grand Chessboard. Zbigniew Brzezinski. If you ever read that, the Grand Chessboard, sort of how they move things around, those same names were popping up as some of his supporters, and I was like, it's kind of a coincidence, but I don't believe in coincidences. This was just 19-year-old asking questions, just asking questions. So I've always tried to do the opposite of what people do. But when he was elected, the same day, Young Jeezy song, "My President is Black, My Lambo's Blue." That song was playing in my dorm rooms for the next 2 weeks straight. I mean, it was blasted everywhere. Black people were happy and twerking and dancing in the streets. They were selling mugs and T-shirts. People made a lot of money off the Obama era because they were just so happy. This is how downtrodden some Black people were. They were just so happy. They took a mixed Kenyan American as Black and just, all right, he's Black, whatever, we'll take it. That's close enough. Uh, and I was like, I mean, what are we talking about here? I know, I guess I'm splitting hairs, but I'm like, he's not. So,
Okay.
all right, whatever. But my biggest problem with Obama basically is that he knew what he was doing. He had this presentation as, I'm a Black president, and this and that, and I'm doing this for all Americans. And Black people were like, cool, now we're all Americans, all of this. And then you just look at what he did while he was in it. He passed a bill for LGBTQ, which that has nothing to do with it, and he killed more people than any other president. That's it.
The wars.
I mean, those are the two main things. And with his drone program, he has a nice smile. He can sing Al Green, plays basketball, but he murdered a lot of people, a lot of innocent people with the drone program. And my biggest problem is not, I don't have any personal problem. I don't know him, but it's just from a political standpoint. People keep feeding it to these politicians.
Yep.
It's like, I'm 34. And I stopped thinking about politics in that manner when I was like Obama's what was the nail in the coffin. I already was kind of, these politicians are weird, but that was the nail in the coffin. I was like, they can trick you this bad to think like, oh man, Black people thought they'd get reparations next week. And, oh man, we're going to have, Black owned everything and Black restaurants. And I'm like, calm down, people. It's the same thing every single time. They keep bringing in politicians. It's people twice my age that still feed into the president does it. The president is middle management.
Yeah.
If you've ever worked middle management, it's the worst job to have because you're not powerful enough to change anything, but you're just powerful enough to have to answer all the questions. So you're like, it's a terrible job to have, actually. So nothing personal with Obama. It's just the truth. I was like, how y'all, are we reading the same stuff? Like, it just kind of was crossing wires. And then, the whole solidarity with Black people on college campus hated me for like 2 months because I wrote as Obama the Antichrist on Facebook. And people just hate it. I've had this whole like breakdown, and I've been trolling since before that was a word. Like just to see a reaction, because like I said before, I did stand up. I have balls of steel, so to say. I don't, criticism doesn't affect me. Like if somebody criticizes, I just take it and learn from it. So it actually fuels me more, which is sort of like on Twitter, as you say, putting out funny stuff.
Yeah.
I don't mind being criticized. I don't care, man. Okay. Smile, go take a walk. Life is too good to care that much about stuff. So yeah, I put that, and I've always been a little different. But now, 15 years later, people were like, yeah, Obama didn't do anything for Black people. What were we thinking? I'm like, why couldn't y'all just think of that back then? I mean, Jesus Christ, it's not that hard. He just popped up out of nowhere and he was president.
Yeah.
Come on, man. So it is what it is. But yeah, national politics, not my thing.
Interesting. Yeah, I had a feeling it had something to do with like false hope. That's what I figured the comment. Yeah, it's a false hope. And I think it's interesting. I've always sort of thought of myself as left of center, and I've gotten a lot of pushback from people who who are like, you're writing about Bitcoin is like, uber libertarian, whatever thing. I'm just like, now you guys are using all this like old terminology for it. It's even the concepts you're applying to it. One, it's apolitical. There's nothing in the white paper that talks about what politics you need to believe in Bitcoin. But what I would like for most people to get, and I drew this out the other day. I was speaking with an uncle of mine who not a big supporter of it, not really into it. And I respect a lot of the work he did. He was actually in Latin America in the 80s doing work with food cooperatives and doing like real underground good work with people. And I explained to him, I was like, I don't think that Bitcoin like ends government or ends whatever. But I said, like, we're at a place now where people are sort of, they bounce back and forth between like the idea of the corporation and the state. You're either sort of right wing pro corporation, or you're left and you're pro state. But none of that really empowers people. You're constantly ping-ponging yourself between these two entities. Whereas I think Bitcoin turns it from like a pole, two different poles, it adds a third pole. So you had the individual as that third pole, and now the individual with Bitcoin, I'll say in cold storage, becomes a new source of power or a new dimension of power in the world. And I don't think anybody knows how that will play out, but I can't imagine being against that idea, given what we've seen since especially 1950 with currency debasement around the world, something that we're just now starting to experience as Americans. So I apologize about the rant a little bit, but I think similar to what you're trying to do with Bitcoin, what I'm trying to say is like, look, I'm not even trying to get into the politics of all this. I'm just trying to say that here's this new thing that exists in the world that can help truly empower you. And that word
Mhm.
sort of grates on me as someone who was in academia. There's a lot of ways that people talk about empowerment and this and that. I'm like, I don't really think any of that is really empowerment. I'm sorry, like,
Yeah.
maybe like to some degree, but I'm talking about financial empowerment to make financial decisions with your own life, with nobody telling you what you could do about that.
Right.
Who's against that? Who's against that? Like, who would really be like,
Yeah.
So I apologize about the rant,
No, no, perfect.
but I do appreciate.
Nah,
Yep.
I think you're spot on. Bitcoin is apolitical. I think more people should realize that because isn't it crazy when you mention Bitcoin, the boxes they put you in?
Immediately.
Because I've had black people who've told me when I mention Bitcoin is like, oh, well, you're just trying to appease the white libertarian side of it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what? How did you just put me in this box? Just I was saying, and then you've had other side is like, oh, Bitcoin is, oh, well, you one of those tech geeks and one of those hippies in San Francisco. You're like, what? How did I get put in all these boxes? I am Isaiah Jackson. If you have any questions, ask me. Don't stop putting me in these
Yeah.
boxes. But that's how people delineate the ways that they think about certain people is putting you in this box or this tribe. Okay, well, he's that type of person. He's that type of person. What I've noticed is when you are sort of a Renaissance man, when you're good at different areas and you have an opinion about different things, people don't know how to deal with you.
Yep.
So yeah, I've just gotten used to the fact that people are just not going to know how to deal with me because you can't just say you're this, you're that, and I'm like, no. And most people want to join clubs, but hey, man, I've been beat up before because I wouldn't join gangs. You think I'm gonna
Mm,
be forced to join a political party or be forced to be a Bitcoin maximalist or a crypto guy? It's like, come on, man. I've been through bigger battles than that over joining groups, and I'm an individual. That's one thing I learned about myself very early. Is like I'm willing to fight for my individuality and my own sovereignty. So please don't put me in these boxes like they tried to do you. It's like you mentioned Bitcoin, you must be a libertarian. I'm like,
sure.
man, that's crazy how that works, right?
Yeah, I think that's my biggest. That's what I think the biggest impediment is to adoption. I think it's this psychology that people have to get out of thinking in sort of the frameworks that they've been thinking in, like you're either on the right or the left or this. Whereas I think I think it literally adds a new dimension to our reality now, something that
Mhm.
humanity has never experienced. And I think also I have friends that'll sort of joke around, like, they'll ask me about something like, oh, we don't want to hear about Bitcoin right now. And I don't actually, like, I write about it and I work now trying to educate people about it. But my thoughts about it are like, when you do think about the implications of something like this existing, I don't see how you can't be excited if you have sort of any understanding of human history, just like any, even
Right.
the most shallow understanding of it. So,
Right, exactly. I wake up excited every day, man, because I know the implications, and you know what's crazy, Frank? We're solving problems people don't know they have yet.
yes,
That's the crazy thing about it is they don't even realize the problems that we're solving. Well, we get thanked later for it. It is what it is. But you know, it's sort of like being a parent, and you've already gone through your teenage years and college years, and you've already worked, and then your kids are trying to explain to you why they're going to do it a different way, and you're
yeah,
just sitting there like, well, you'll thank me 10 years from now. I don't care. That's how I sort of look at it. It's like
that's fair.
it's all good. 10 years, I'll all be singing our praises, saying thank you so much for putting out all this information that's easy for me to find and to learn about how I can do this.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll leave it at that. I know this guy's been on. You've been on CNBC. Been he's a big personality. So thank you for taking time to do this with the small podcast. Genuinely,
Absolutely.
such a huge fan of your work, your voice, the whole thing. It's good to finally connect with you, and yeah, much appreciated. Please let people know where they could find you. Again, let them know the name of your book, the app you're working with, all that stuff.
Oh yes. So the new ebook, stacksatsmf.com. You can find it there. 33% off. You can also pay with Lightning as well. $8 can give you generational wealth, just stacking sats. And Bitcoin in Black America, you can find on Amazon. And I will be on the book tour for this year. So look out for that as well. And you can find me on Twitter at Bitcoin ZAY, Bitcoin Z. Find me there. And yeah, if you have any DMs or want to chat, just let me know, and we'll speak more.
Awesome. All right, much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. I appreciate it, man.
My pleasure.